This is GTR, Genesis Timeline and Roots. In a world of fractured stories, timelines buried, and truths erased, one project dares to ask the question, what if everything you thought you knew about history was wrong? This is GTR, Genesis Timeline and Roots. A 5,025-year simulated walkthrough tracing a melanated Adam back to 4000 BC. Over the last decade, new revelations confirm a black origin for humanity, from European vaults to tribal memory, Babylon to Britain. This is not just history, this is a challenge, a simulation, a movement. Meet the man behind GTR, Dr. Wilton MacDonald II, Caymanian, British, Jamaican, Haplogroup E and stateless for 26 years. Now a global explorer, 119 countries and counting. A hedge fund lawyer, a UK chartered accountant, a seeker of the lost archives of our people. But the question remains, if all black people came out of Africa, does that make us only African? Or are we also European, Scottish, Native American, Jacobite Hebrew, Asian? GTR exists to answer that question. You've felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world, a splinter in your mind. That splinter has brought you here, to GTR. Whites can't trace their roots before the 1800s. Where's ours? Where are the tribes? The languages, the kings, the queens, the true Hebrews? Where did the giants go? Where are the Neanderthals? Angels, aliens? Why do we speak in so many tongues? Was Babel just a myth? A memory? History has holes. Hollywood has lied. The system was never made for us to remember. Only 5 to 8% of people today are white. And what about the 1800 stories and postcards of the cabbage babies? But nearly all history books center their story. That doesn't add up. Atlantis, lost cities, vanished civilizations, or were they erased? Try GTR. Take the red pill and awaken to the truth of your ancestors. Or take the blue pill and keep dreaming a fantasy. GTR, a simulated walkthrough of Black Hebrew history and eschatology. This is the beginning of remembering. This is GTR, Genesis Timeline and Roots.
Hello again, K-Man. This is your host, Dr. Wilton MacDonald of GTR, Genesis Timeline Roots. And episode 30 is focused on the 11 pioneers who contributed and built up the Seventh-day Adventist Church as we know it today, just about 140 years old since the first General Conference was held in the late 1880s. I believe it was 1888. I am an Adventist. My family, most of them are members, are Seventh-day Adventist and observing the Shabbat, being so-called Judeo-Christian. And this is what has influenced my whole life. And it's part of who I am. It's important as we melanated people define our own stories, telling these accounts of who we are, what we are, where we are, when, even with a temporal time element, when we truly were. To understand where we are headed, where we are going, we must fully embrace and just not listen to those who are just trying to tell our stories. So GTR, we exist to tell this story, provide a framework in which we can assess history, assess science, assess our past, assess the world, provide some clear lens. And the essence of GTR would be this timeline, focusing on Judeo-Christian events along a timeline of about 5,026 years. And there are many timelines out there. One which bursts the human scale with evolution into the millions. Others that look at 6,000 years. That would be Reverend James Ussher. Here we're looking at deleting the Middle Ages, and condensing that timeline where 500s became 1500s. And we're going to present a lot of future episodes. We'll focus on the timeline itself and on those edited and redacted dates that has forced us to condense and consolidate this current timeline. But part of what we are doing here in GTR is to help people connect with their families. And in the last episode, in episode 29, I interviewed David Rivers, pleasant chap living in Tampa, Florida, and sharing his family roots, paternal, maternal, linking up Central America with the Cayman Islands, again, trying to extend into Europe, but facing the brick walls because he is Haplogroup R. And we know that the E's, such as what I am, and the A's, B's, C, D's, they can readily connect to Europe, but the R's do have a problem and an issue in connecting. And that goes against the mainstream grain. And part of my research into another higher doctorate is what is the default haplogroup of Europe and the UK, E versus R, and set about to try and prove this working hypothesis and to synthesize, break it apart, and just to flesh out the evidence, the evidentiary records, and the genealogy records concerning the origins of man, the origins of these two particular male haplogroups, E and R. Those are like the polar opposites and polar ends, the prototypical white and then the prototypical black. And which one is really default within the time frame of just 200 years. So we're going to help other family members connect with their roots, connect with the trees, and just do it charitable, voluntary basis. So we will be having more sessions with real life tracing. We will have a look at some of the other religions, like in Latter-day Saints. They're plugged into genealogical research. This is the family search, family tree services. You may have seen the records from Jamaica and the records they have compiled on behalf of the Church of Latter-day Saints, and looking at the Mormon profile, looking at the bio of Joseph Smith, looking at even Islam, which is a pretty dominant religion in Africa, and just listening to the accounts, not just of Joshua Mapunga and others and the journalists from Kenya, like David Wakesa and others, but their stories, looking at the deep dive and research about the Jewish roots, the Hebrew roots. Again, folks, we are melanated people created in God's divine image. We're all God's people. This is a message of inclusion. But over the last 100 years especially, Blacks have been marginalized. They have been called every derogatory name on the planet. And we have been ostracized in such a way that it breaks the scale. It's just no other demographic people have been made to endure the kinds of just treatment blacks to relegate us to literally not to the back of the bus, but on the fender of the bus, back into off the bus, where we don't even count as humans. We need to take these things back to claim our place, who we are, what we are, where we are, when we are, or when we were, because we need to understand.
This is GTR, Genesis Timeline and Roots.
Before diving into the central theme and topics, there are two little things that I really want to touch on because we touched on it in prior episodes. We had episode 25 and 26 when we looked at racism by country, and we noticed the figure Leopold of Belgium. How could we miss that figure? So I will turn to this bio and speak briefly about it because it was covered in a prior episode, and we need to just visit this before we delve into the main course. So we have this figure of Belgium, and of course, lots of honors have been bestowed on this man, and we know today the institutions of Europe, the beating heart of Europe, is split between Belgium and France. Look at the institutions, the courts, the commission, the parliament, the institutions, the organs of Europe, situated in Belgium and France. And France has done an awesome job. They want a claim to colonize Africa, and we need to unpack what that really meant for Africans. You know, they control the currencies, and today they've carved it out. Now there's pressure to remove France from the African continent because there's sheer dominance of the people of Africa living, well below the poverty lines. So this man, Leopold II of Belgium, born in 1835, GTR calculator, it's very close to this cloning period, the cabbage baby period. Now, it says that in his early life, he was born to Leopold I and second wife, Louise, the daughter of King Louis Philippe of France. A lot of these images, just accept them with a grain of salt, who these people were. Clearly, the numbers do not work. And I have stressed this time and time again. When you look at all these figures that are splashed in the press, splashed in the history books, that these were white leaders, it's impossible. You can't have a small 7-8% non-Hispanic whites, and I say that time and time again, and claim the kind of history of the planet that these people lived, and they occupied these European countries in the 1700s, in the 1600s. So this chap, Leopold II, he was given dominion over the Congo. At one point, he was the sole owner of the Congo, 1885 to 1908, and he committed so many atrocities. He killed, he murdered thousands and thousands of Africans. This person has been lauded up and given memorials and statues and images. But who was this person? I disconnected Leopold from the family, from his parents, because of the ancestry. We note here, both in the mother's side, French Louis Philippe, and on the father's side. So his mother had a surname of Bourbon, and the father, Leopold I. And we know that his grandfather being France, Frederick, born Osborne, Duke of Leeds in England. So it was disconnected because, let me show you here the haplogroups, and this is taken from a genetic site, that the kings and queens of Belgium, according to the researchers, they were R's. Now, we didn't see a lot of male descendants for Leopold, but according to this website and others, Leopold and his forefathers were Haplogroup R, cabbage baby. And we note that not all the haplogroups are given. These German groups have mostly maternal. We have U and T. Those are all hybrids. We have Dukes of Austria, They claim to be haplogroup Rs. A lot of it has been redacted and changed. Kings and queens of England, Edward IV, Richard III. We have J's. James. Looks like that's Brother James who gave us the Bible. James I gave us the Bible in 1611 or 611, an R. And then Charles I, the person who birthed. Now we have the reign of King Charles the Third currently, but Charles II, also called Black Boy, literally called Black Boy, was, according to this site, an R. All this is hocus pocus. So that would make the current King Charles, Prince of Wales, an R. I just cannot. I mean, maybe the Prince of Wales today would be an R, but the historic kings, Black Boy, Charles II, and his father being R's, I find it hard to believe. James I, who gave us the Bible, images of a black, swarthy, dark man, clearly not an R. And then Edward and Richard being J's, which are sort of hybrids. This is just shocking, and this is what they say. Just like the McDonald's, they claim that the McDonald's are R's, but then they don't match. We can see that they don't match, and I've proven and shown through DNA testing that the R's don't match in the case of the McDonald's. So we were back to Leopold and the family, the Flemish, the Belgians being R. This is really, really sad. And French kings, Louis the 13th, we have Louis, even the 16th, an R. Napoleon was an E. So how do you reconcile this? They tell you that Napoleon was an E. Clearly, we know he was an E. How does a sub-Saharan man take over from Louis the 16th, an R? We don't have very many R's. Again, 7 to 8% non-Hispanic whites, and they're largely R's and H's. H in the case of women, R in the case of men. I just find it very, very hard to accept. And this is why, and for this reason, I disconnected Leopold II from the family. Even though the images are white, these kings and queens of Belgium and UK and Europe were black people. And Leopold's daughter is married into, and that was Clementine, as I recall, she was married into a black Napoleon family. And there you have it. Clementine was married to a Prince Napoleon V. And all the lines of Napoleon, even though they look white, they were haplogroup E, like me, aka black men, aka original man. I just find it hard just to accept the narrative. But that's why I disconnected Leopold and the ghastly things that he did to the Congolese, and the millions just murdered and maimed. This is just not a natural thing. And what about the deep dive into his family background? Here it is. Now, I am not quick to assign this person. We know that his daughter is married into the Napoleon line. And I don't know if you knew this, but that's the beautiful thing. Having a tree that is 1,000,000+ in size, we can make these connections. So with Leopold, he had Clementine was a daughter, and so his granddaughter, Marie, his daughter Clementine was married to Prince Napoleon V. We know this, that Napoleon Bonaparte was a haplogroup E. So I don't know about the images as presented in the 1700s. We see here that even the ancestors of Clementine's husband, this Prince Napoleon V, Girolamo Napoleon Bonaparte, 1784. In France, he was a haplogroup E, E as in sub-Saharan African. And that's significant. That says a lot. So I just don't know about the color. The color to me is off. And again, if all these people lived in the 1700s, we should have more whites today, but we don't. The numbers are thin. And the question even, where did the fair-skinned folks come from? You must ask the question. Not until I visited North Africa, and I keep saying, when I visited North Africa, they said, well, we can't eat the wheat. We can't. We need GMO crops. We can't still today. And our ancestors were black just 200 years ago. And the images in the Roman towns and villages, 5,000 images with the faces removed, cut off. Just 200 years ago, they're claiming to be black. So you have to ask the question, how did these fair-skinned people come about? Because you cannot get a black person from a fair-skinned person. You can't get a black person from a white person. That's like trying to take your black coffee back from your latte, from your cappuccino. Go ahead, do that, try. This is it, simple 101. Now, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a geneticist, but this is what they're trying to tell you. Well, fine, these people were living. Leopold II, I refuse to connect him to his supposed family and familial lines. According to this, he was born, his father was Leopold I, and his mother was a Louise Marie. I don't swear about what her color really was, and Louise's father was a Louis Philippe. This goes back and traces back to notable black kings of France. Again, Napoleon was clearly a black man of France. And some of these images, most of them, and you generally get one image. Look at the portrait, you generally get one image, and that's it, of these persons who are pasty white, and you're told to accept it. And if you're going back in time into ancient France, you can see here that there were people who were clearly black. And I'm showing you even here a Marie de Medici. We have figures that have found portraits, competing portraits, which were melanated black people. We know that. That's just common sense. And the further you go back, you will hit black. And this is a Charles IV Bourbon. These are French figures. And I am uncovering images that are clearly black images. But I just allow the white ones to stand because just to identify, for identification purposes. But here for Leopold, I did not connect him with family members. He's there. He's standing out as Leopold II, and history, the root, family members, unknown. So big question mark. We know he got a lot. He accomplished a lot for France and Belgium. He acquired vast sums of wealth, and he murdered thousands and thousands of Africans in the process, the massacre in the Congo. We don't know about his true background, and someone who's that vile, that wicked, basically no soul, soulless, he would be a suitable candidate for a cabbage baby-linked figure. He was such an awful person, even worse than Hitler. People have made the comparison. He breaks every scale.
This is GTR, Genesis Timeline and Roots.
Have you ever noticed about the griffin? This iconic animal, part eagle, part lion, and it is touching on a lot of the Middle East, the African, Persian history. See, Egyptian, Persia, even in ancient Hebrew, Mesopotamia, Iran. This figure has been in our global history, etched in stone, in wood carvings. And I just find it just fascinating. See, you could see a wood carving there, that this creature, which is a hybrid, and just like for a unicorn, a fantasy, type, figure animal, which they have no skeletal remains. I mean, it's just some kind of, what do I call it, chimera. It's a combination animal. If anyone wanted to just take a guess, do you realize that the emblem, I call it a red, white, and blue country. There's several red, white, and blue countries based on the flags. That's a bit here. We're all in school. We're all learning something new. So the red, white, and blue countries, USA, UK, France, Russia, Netherlands, to name a few, which have the colors and use the colors of red, white, and blue. And here we have in the emblem, the image here, the griffin has been slaughtered and killed by the man on the horse. And that represents a change in world order. So that griffin is killed by the white guy in the horse. And it just represents to me symbolically the doing away of a super empire, the Black Empire. The griffin is a symbol of the world that was before that reset. And pointing out, and we will do a separate episode on the griffin because this is a fascinating animal that covered so many civilizations, so many countries. And we know the postcards for the cabbage babies, they first came out in Russia, a red, white, and blue country, which has its colors of its flags, red, white, and blue. And this passing of the baton, this doing away with one world power and superpower that is now being replaced, this is very, very telling. We will do another episode on the griffin.
This is GTR, Genesis Timeline and Roots.
Now we're going into our main presentation on the pioneers, the 11 pioneers who contributed to the Adventist faith and the church structure. Who were these individuals? The first of 11 would be Charles Fitch. Now, he was born in 1805 and he died in 1844, the year of the Great Disappointment, right, in the Millerite movement. And we're not going to go into the Millerite movement, James Miller and those persons who were preparing for Christ's return, not realizing that they miscalculated. They were thinking that God was coming when he was moving from one phase of the judgment to the next. In 1844, they sold possessions and they were truly sorely disappointed. Maybe perhaps this guy died of the broken heart. We got a sense that he had some high fever and he died in 1844, 8 days before he expected Christ to come. And he was 39 years old. Charles Fitch, he was a preacher. He was an American and very much part of the Millerite movement. And the first profile that we will touch on when we look at the pioneers of the Adventist church movement. You could see here a running list of the 11 persons, and they're all white, even Ellen White, who we'll come to in a moment because she was clearly of mixed race. She was a rather dark lady. This is a list of the 11 persons we're going to cover during this episode 30. So let's look at Reverend Charles Fitch. I tried to really look at similarities in the profiles. This person, like pretty much all of them, died with no known male heirs. There is a portrait that was provided. Here it is. This is what he looked like, 1805 to 1844. Very, very few portraits, and it's generally one that is given and offered. His mom was a Bushnell. We see here that his father was a Daniel Allen Fitch. Was it Canada or USA connected? Possibly UK English connections, though I had established all of those connections long before I delved into this research topic. I had these names on my tree, and largely it's stemming from my own genealogy. Black-rooted Euromores, Black-rooted English personalities. Their names existed. So who are these persons then? The Whitfield, Thurgood, Humphrey goes back to England. We don't know his haplogroup. We don't know. The problem with this profile, like many others, there are no living male heirs to test. Reverend Charles, he had a son, and that Charles, he died without leaving an issue. There was a Robert, again, no known male heirs. So William, Brickwall. And so with one portrait, we don't know what his father looked like. That would be a Daniel, and he was the first Adventist pioneer. There's only one portrait that I found of this man. And the timeline being early 1800s would be right in the midst of the cloning type exercises. Let's move to the next profile. And I like the fact that Wiki was able to devote a page looking at the pioneers, made it simple for us. John Nevins Andrews. Now, who was this person? Andrews, one of the universities I attended, and some of you there in Cayman attended Andrews University in Barron Springs, Michigan. It is the same character, same man whose name, the college and the university was renamed a few times, but the current name of Andrews, it's coming from this person, John Nevins Andrews, born in 1829 in Poland, not the Poland, the country, but Maine, Poland, Maine, USA, and he died in Basel, Switzerland. He was one of the first missionaries to make it over. He worked along the Battle Creek, Michigan Conference, and he played a pivotal role in the establishment of Adventist theology. And of course, that school was named after him, the Andrews University. Let us look at his genealogy and see if we see anything that strikes us about the man. Okay, going through his family tree, we have the Adventist pioneer, 1829. And his mom, she has that stoic presence. She was a Pottle. Sarah almost sounds like my dad's maternal line, the Potts. She was a Pottle. And she had a maternal mother, Ricker, and William Pottle. And there's really not much to go on. Like so many persons in the States adopted a middle name. You notice that the middle name was given by the maternal side. In this case, he was given the name Nevins, and Nevins came from his father's mother. And his dad, again, a very serious-looking chap, was an Edward Andrews. How about with commercial photos? I had to make the point and comment that he's given a strong, this clearly is a photograph. It's not even a painting. He died in 1865. This is close to when commercial photography was made available. We have to remind ourselves, mid-1800s. That was the period. Even for the rich, it was hard. And these were missionaries. These were not people with lots of money. And he has a photograph. The genealogy extends into the States. DAR, that's Daughters of the American Revolution. You'll see this symbol crop up in a lot of the genealogical records. They're very proud of that, the Daughters of the American Revolution, and most of them are Black people. Now you have an English connection. Again, like in the case of Fitch, I recorded scores of these records long before I commenced this journey to map out the genealogy for the 11 figures. So he's connected, as a white guy, he's connected to Black family trees. That's why I note here about the caucus and not going beyond Edward, because Edward was 1797. That's entering into the unknown. That's pre-1800s. I cannot swear by any profile that is white that would go into the 1700s. And he had some McFarlane Stewart lick. Now, Stewart means Schwartz, means Black. German, the Stewart. Stewarts were Black. Again, Schwartz in German means Black. There are some links that I found, and those would be maternal links, either maternal links or rather paternal maternal links. He did not have really any male heirs. You could see here that he had a son and 3 daughters, a Mary, Angelina, and a Caroline. Let's look at his son, Charles. Now we have Charles had a Dr. Nevins Andrews and an Edwin. Edwin died at age 15, not happening there in terms of issue and offspring. And for Dr. John Nevins, he had a daughter, 2, 3. Okay, William, he had some issue. They were born in China, no children. That's William. Robert, because fascinating to find the male DNA in order to conduct the test to find out the haplogroup, not possible. So this man died with no traceable male heirs to his legacy for proper male Y DNA tracing. And we go down to Joseph Bates, an American seaman and revivalist minister. He interacted with James White and Ellen White, born in Rochester, Massachusetts, 1792. Now again, we're going into the danger zone, pre-1800s. Let us look at his tree. Mother's side was an Nye, Deborah, Nye. His father was a Bates, Joseph, and Barnabas, good Hebrew, Samuel. Once more, I had established a lot of these English names and connections before I started this exercise. I cannot confirm who he is linked to because those are black Uramoors. He had a son, at least two, Anson Bates. Let's check out Joseph. His son Joseph? Yeah, nothing. So no, again, male heirs. John Byington. Now, he was a lay preacher, first president of the newly organized Seventh-day Adventist Church. He was born in Vermont, son of a Methodist preacher. Born in 1798. You have a Lucy Hinsdale and connected to the Kellogg. Kellogg had this relationship with that's the cornflakes guy that you would know from breakfast cereals, the founder of the cereal company. He was a strong Adventist, one of our celebrity Adventists. And let me see how far this name goes with Kellogg. We see that his John Byington, born 1798, which again, it's outside the reservation when it comes to the bright lines which we can trace White's back, unless we know his haplogroup. We don't know because there are no male heirs, like in the other cases. I mean, look at his son, John. He looks mixed race, and that's his boy. His wife, Catherine Newton, she had a cloudy type background. I mean, she was a Newton and end of the line in Massachusetts, nothing. But his son looks like he was a mixed race person. John's dad was Justice and then David. Notice that a lot of Hebrew names: Samuel, Daniel, David, John. And on the maternal side, this gentleman was related to, on his mother's side, the Kellogg's, and is the breakfast cereal guy. He was one of our famous Adventist pioneers. We'll come to him in a moment, and we can see the Kellogg line, which traces back into England. And I was able to track the Kellogg's even before this exercise into Essex, England, in the 1600s. Okay. A Daniel Bordeaux. He was born 1835. Within the range, this is the French-speaking Canada, and he married a Marion Saxby and interacted also with Ellen White. So with Daniel's connection, one portrait, 1835. Let's see if we can go to his family tree. The French influence is so apparent. This is kicking. Austin had no kids. Sister, the man's daughter, was Patience. His wife was a Marian, a Saxby, and Barker, also surname Ward. Now, there's very little genealogy. His father was an Augustin, 1810. French Canada, Bordeaux. Just don't find a lot of connections. Going back to common ancestor, you have a connection with a Savile. This is the Black Yorkshire. People don't realize this, but in Yorkshire, England, Yorkshire folk, they were black people. Family crests, shields, work that Dr. Marie Charles has done. They were black, the Black Yorkshire people. And I had all this information encoded in my family tree again before. All of this was grandfathered in once I started to research the family lines of this French Canadian. But if he was white, I just don't see much of any family. And his wife, with her stoic, serious, sort of steely gaze, a Saxby, she looks a bit odd. She was born in 1835. Not much here, folks. Merritt Eaton Cornell, not the same person who founded Cornell University. I mean, I attended Cornell way back in 2002, 2003. This Merritt Cornell, 1827, born in New York State. but no portrait. Parents, Isaac, again, Hebrew names. Abigail was the grandmother, Abigail Allen. Margaret, maiden name was Larman. So his mom was a Larman, his father, Hebrew name Isaac, his grandfather was Joseph. Oh, you can't hide Zebulon, Zebedee, Daniel. So all of these Cornell names, these were black people, and William Cornell. Now, Ezra Cornell and the founders of Cornell University, they came off of a common root. You could see that they definitely had major Hebrew and Jewish influence. Look at the names: Isaac, Joseph, Zebulon, Zebedee, Daniel, Stephen, Thomas. His paternal side is well established. Maternal, Larman, couldn't find much of anything. And as far as his male heirs, didn't find much at all. His wife was a Angelian Leon. We have a John Norton Loughborough. So the Loughborough, 1832. He was an early Adventist minister. So here we have John's profile, and you can tell who his mom's family name, again, it's giving a middle name. It's the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant way. Give your son the maiden name of his mom. So really and truly, I should have been something like Wilton Ramlal MacDonald, Wilton George MacDonald, based on my father's name. But given a middle name, Norton featured on my family tree. Norton's in Jamaica, connected to the Black MacDonalds. In this case, you had a Minerva Norton, tried to patch it together, go back in time to see what I could find. Norton being a prominent name that featured on my family tree, in my genealogy. A Haley, dead end, and let's see, and Northern Nathan, used interchangeably. Germany, and you'd arrive in Germany, Black Germany. So his mother's side just appears to be Black German, but his father, Nathan Benson Loughborough, New Jersey, USA, and it fizzles into nothingness. There's a Morford. Let's check the heirs. I didn't see a lot of his heirs. You had, his wife looks like a strange one. Mary Jane Walker. I searched because Walker is a popular name. Didn't find any family tree for her. She just literally fell from the sky. We had sisters, Mary Jane and Elizabeth. Teresa, one male who was married to a steward. Back then, Stewart, Schwartz, Black. Delmar was married to one, but no children. Ghostly power profile once more. Uriah Smith, born 1832. One of my favorites because he also liked to deal with timelines and prophecy. James Ussher was one, but Uriah Smith, he enjoyed timelines. After all, Genesis timeline roots. I like him already. Let's see, 1832 to 1903. He was a poet. Was great. Writer, died of a stroke. Did some work on Daniel and Revelation and end time, eschatology, end time events. Let's see if I can go to his family tree. Well, he had a son called Wilton. I like that name indeed. 1856. But Wilton had no kids. Samuel Parker, no kids. Now, his wife, again, looks a bit strange. She was a Stevens, Harriet Stevens, Cyprian Stevens, her father, and a Thayer. Not much to go on. Jesse, another Jewish. Uriah, Zachariah, another Zachariah. Jonathan, Thomas, all Jewish Hebrew names. And it terminates somewhere in England. And even again, before I started this exercise, I was able to pen and cement the Smith family tree, which he's a part of, but I'm not sure about the connections. It all depends on the haplogroup, and he has no known living male heirs to test. There's even a Scottish Spalding on his mother's side. Not able to confirm much for Uriah Smith. All right, so we have here Ellen White and her husband, James Springer White. Now, Ellen White was born a Harmon in 1827. She had a black mom from New Jersey, and her husband, James Springer White, a Freemason. When you look at the graves where he's buried, you will get a few hints. In 1821 in Maine. So this is Ellen White. One of the main characters and figures in Adventist in history, in the organizational structure, the writings, teachings, well-respected, well-regarded. But, her background is a bit cloudy. And I'm wondering to myself, if she wrote so many books, did she write something about the appearance of God? Because she was permitted to see Satan. I did say that and state that clearly in one of the other episodes, in the image of God. That was episode 16, with the loose skin and hanging, the flesh hanging, the Satan who she saw, but yet there's no clear description of God. And I'm wondering if that's just waiting to be released. She had several visions. She even witnessed Satan. Surprisingly, she did not see a clear vision of Christ. And yet the Adventist Church has consistently, like all others, portrayed God as a white person. And that's where I really have spoken out, to the church. I've asked them about it, about the historical accuracy, the Review and Herald, and the publications of the Bible characters that we know were clearly melanated. And this is in sync with Hollywood, in sync with all of the civil, secular agencies of the world, all marching to the same tune, that God was white. And remember, GTR, we did an episode 16, in the image made black, in the image of God. And so Ellen White had these visions. Ellen White observed Satan in his form, with a sagging skin and flesh, hanging loose about the hands, hanging loose about the face, in her book, Early Writings. But she did not see, again, the image of God. And I found that to be so troubling. And who knows, one day we might see one of her books or writings come up. Here, her husband was James Springer White. Notice the use of the middle name. We'll come to that, about Springer. And he was born in Maine, in the USA in 1821. And he died in Battle Creek. And if you look at even some of the graves, you would see this is just one of the graves of Mr. White with the Egyptian phalanx. And this obelisk featuring at the grave, again, is very telling. In Egyptology, we know, in sun worship, why is the phalanx and the obelisk, why it features. We don't know, no explanations are given. Now, they had several kids. You have a James Edison White. Look at her ancestry. Her father was a Robert Harmon. Again, he can pass for a gentleman from St. Elizabeth, but give benefit of doubt, he's a white guy. Robert F. Harmon. And he was born in Maine, 1786. And that's pushing it. Now, her mom, there is no photograph. I've searched high and low. Her mom was a straight black woman. She was born in Maine and died in Illinois. And the family lived in New Jersey. Let's see. Ellen White's father, Joseph Gold, born in Maine, and another Joseph Gold. Other grandfather was born in Massachusetts. We notice the connection, the Harmon with the DAR, the Daughters of the American Republic. Notice that there would be some kind of Caucasus connection. And turning to her husband, James White, notice that his father was John White, and his mother was a Jowett, born in New Hampshire. And then the mother's father, David, there's just a drop off, a Massachusetts connection, that's it. And John White we have a connection to a salmon white. We don't know the haplogroup. Supposedly there are significant Jewish names. We have the Solomon, we have Jonathan, we have Josiah, another Josiah, a John, all Jewish Hebrew names, and Robert, not really a biblical name, but the griffin, that animal, that griffin that we mentioned earlier, features prominently in the crest. But like in the case of all the others, I had this particular white family. I noticed they were records. There were records of all these Richard, Robert, all these records were in place even before I started my deep dive. Now, I'm really not going to debate this with anyone, but there are many clippings. The Minneapolis Journal, October 20, 1888, the year of the first General Conference. She's describing Ellen White. She has a peculiar, dark, swarthy face, a low brow, and thick lips. And this is the Minneapolis Journal in the USA. And if you're just going to just Google Ellen White, regardless of aging, in the process of aging, look at it. You're going to find different images, different thickness of the lips, different facial features. It's like this woman keeps changing over time. There are many images of this woman, and they can't just stick to one image. She changes and morphs depending on the occasion. Her holding up the Bible, she held up a 30-pound Bible. She held it up for hours, astonished people whilst in vision, and the face keeps changing, and the band keeps playing on and on. And what is Ellen DeGeneres? I think she's doing there. But you could see my point here. Image of a white Jesus, that's very popular with the Review and Herald, the Adventist Church. Keep supporting the whitewashed image. But my point is the woman, she morphs and changes over time. But that said, I've had the White family in my genealogy and close to my McDonald's. Let me show you.
This is GTR, Genesis Timeline and Roots.
So one of my close cousins, and I've spoken to her, Leonie White, and she has been speaking to me on genealogy, family tree matters for years, and connected to Hezron. Let me look up her profile. These would be the surname White. We had the James White, but connected to my closest relatives in Jamaica, we have persons who bear the name White. And Leonie's father, we had a Lloyd White, a grandfather called Vincent, and there's Leonie White. And her mother was Sybil May MacDonald. Her mom was a MacDonald. We had Isaac, and this is my cousin. So this would be her cousin. Leonie's cousin would be Hezron, very Hebrew Jewish name, and it comes off of his dad was an Ezric. So Ezric was a brother. So it's really two siblings, kids. Sybil was the mom for Leonie, and Ezric was the father of Hezron. And I have done many, many tests and very closely aligned with Hezron. Strong Hebrew Jewish name. His father's Ezric, and then Isaac, the grandfather, 1899, James Henry, and we match up on James. James is the connected 2x, 2 times grandfather. So these are all close family connections. Stepping back, so we can go back to Hezron, Black, McDonald, Haplogroup E, and his father Ezric, going back to Sybil, Ezric's sister, and then the daughter, who is surname White, because we had a lot of relatives who on her father's side who were just surname White. Voila, the Griffins appear. So there is that common connection, but not knowing the haplogroup of James Springer White, we see those Griffins appearing. Robert, we've seen these records before when we're discussing the family tree and the ancestry of the Whites. Go back to the family tree of the White family. So James Springer, he would have gotten his name from a relative. It's common. So his dad's mother was a Nancy Springer. Didn't really see much relatives, but the name is derived from the maternal line. In this case, paternal, maternal. But I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, not knowing his haplogroup and haplotype. I don't know. But we certainly had a lot of these Jewish names. The closest family in the White surname, with a White surname, is Hezron McDonald. You see that's Leonie's first cousin. Jamaica, lives in the States, but we have a familiar link with the Robert Whites. Again, I note the iconic symbol of the griffin, which we will need to do a separate GTR deep dive and presentation on. This has a connection to the UK, even to Wales, but certainly England features in all of these profiles. We have Wells, no surprise. James's wife, James McDonald's wife, was a Wells. A lot of close relations. So here it is that we are presented with these connections, not knowing who this man was, if he was simply borrowing a name, or that he was truly connected to the black line. It's almost like an oxymoron, the black line of the White surname family, which connects back to Jamaica. And there are many White surnames used. But I'm finding out a lot of Whites got their names, and they're borrowed names, and then blacks are originally been given names. Even those in Africa, those McNeils and McDonalds, and there's Celts, the Irish, that they are connected in Nigeria. They live in Nigeria. They have Irish, Scottish names. Names are important. And if you're black, you don't assume that. Look at even Marcus Garvey. His name was Marcus Messiah McGarvey. He was black Irish. And so we have to be careful not to be too dismissive. Oh, shed your colonial names. In the case of my ancestry, my oldest living relative, I pray for him. Da Costa is going to be 110 soon. And his grandfather in 1840 was John William, and his father was William. So these are Scottish men, Scots, black Scots, Haplogroup E. Don't be dismissive. Having you call it a slave name, you say a master's name, colonial name. If you're black, pretty much that's your name. It's your name. That's your name. People change and have changed names, but what I'm finding out that black people were given and kept their names, despite losing their land, losing their identities, but they largely had their names. So this is very fascinating. Notice the Hebrew-Jewish connections, the naming of these individuals connected with Adventism, with the pioneers. And even though they have really short family trees, just look at the children Ellen White had. One of the sons, you have a William Clarence White, and he had children. Without, there are some living relatives. He had sons, James and Herbert. He had a brother, and you have images of the Henry Nicholas White. I didn't see his family, but there were others. I mean, we have John, another brother, John Herbert. But really, the key persons to live on, you have James, there's Henry Nicholas, William Clarence White. We had daughters. We have a James Henry, grandson. We have a Herbert Clarence White. We have an Arthur Lacey White, died just the other day, 1991. So this is the only family we know, even with black connectivity, with black DNA, Ellen White being a black woman, to have some offspring and her husband, James White, with his connections to actual Black surnames White. All the other persons and personalities, we don't know where they're from. And I will again do another list. Looking through at the list, we have Uriah Smith again. We have the John Norton Loughborough. We looked at even Adventist pioneer Merton Eaton Cornell. I'm not saying the profile was wrong, because we know of Cornell University and Ezra Cornell, a relative of this man. But how about this face, his image? Is that accurate? He was born in 1827. Then we have Daniel Bordeaux, or French, Black French, but image of someone who's white, born in 1835. We have the Adventist pioneer John Byington. We have Joseph Bates, John Nevins Andrews of the Andrews University. We have the very first profile, Charles Fitch, 1805, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. And by the way, I was just making sure that we covered this profile. Let me go through it, because I did mention it in passing. John Kellogg, he was the person associated with breakfast cereals. His grandfather, again, I don't know about the images, died in 1856, right about the time that we had some photography. There's one image of a grandfather and a John Preston Kellogg, born in Massachusetts in 1807 and died in 1881. We do know that there is a long-standing history of the Kelloggs, and we can trace this all the way back to England, Essex. And what were the haplogroups? For me, the jury is out. He was a doctor, he was a scientist, and you have photo manipulations. He was married to an Eaton, not much history on her, born in New York, 1853. So I managed to find some parents for Kellogg's wife. We have a Joseph Eaton and Hannah Curry. I was only able to find one image of this woman. And yes, he had children. So in this view, we have a Robert, we have his wife, Ella Eaton. Again, of his haplogroup, we don't know anything. Dr. Kellogg, nothing much about, his haplogroup. But his father, John, and then grandfather, Josiah. We can't get away from the Hebrew Jewish names. They are featuring all over profiles, such as these. Again, clearly, there is a link to England. As far as his race ancestry, if this is an accurate picture, really, an accurate, look like it's a portrait of the man. But there are ancient links on Kellogg, and I was documenting the Kellogg line before we started this exercise. So there you have it. That with Kellogg, he was a real person. He existed. Of course, he's the founder of the breakfast cereals, but I just don't know about his ancestry. His father, John, biblical name, Hebrew name, Bible name, John, Josiah. Definitely. What were the haplogroups? Unknown. But his wife certainly had a prominent name, Eaton, but there's only one profile picture of her, born in 1803, but parents couldn't find any images. So she could be Cabbage Baby linked, definitely. She's just no profiles. And many of the Adventist pioneers, they had hardly any, no living male heirs, and portraits of their parents, just non-existent. And this is the roll call of pioneers. From Ellen White, with a definite Black lineage in her mom's side, husband James Springer White, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, Reverend Charles Fitch, John Nevins Andrews. We have Joseph Bates. Then there is John Byington, Daniel Tresant Bordeaux. We have Merritt Eaton Cornell, John Norton Loughborough, and there's Uriah Smith, 1832. Pretty much no male heirs, not much of the ancestry and ancestors, according to the databases. I've combed through several, including MyHeritage, Ancestry, all the state and government records which I have access to. And there's just thin information when you're piercing the wall. For me, 1800s, that would form the wall, 1800, and you're going into the 1700s, it gets very dicey. We don't know with any degree of certainty who the ancestors, who they were, and we're drawing blanks.
This is GTR, Genesis Timeline and Roots.
The last thing I just wanted to say about this is, with so many competing theories out there, we have been presented, this is a picture, an image of Jesus, and it was something that I grew up on. The Review and Herald, my Bible, the Bible stories, and Jesus is a Christ, or Jesus was for everyone. And look, in this picture, we have one black child carrying a black doll. We have an Asian carrying baby. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 white children. And Jesus himself is white. Now, this image was created before I was born. This is 1960s, 1970s. And the number today, again, I preach to the numbers, 8.2 billion, no more than 8% non-Hispanic whites. And in this image, Christ himself is white, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 kids with Christ, because Christ is leading the children, Christ himself being white, 4 kids, and 2 would be minorities. It paints a picture that's highly manipulative. It's distorted. And this is something that we grew up on, and we have to unlearn a lot of this stuff. The least likely demographic, we are presenting Christ, God, as this image. And this is really what I grew up on. This is just some of the images that I was confronted with. And we could see here another image taken from, this is from the Ellen White estate. And I'm not saying that Ellen White penned this. She was not an artist, but everyone around him as God was ascending in the midst of the disciples. Really, people? And we want Vladimir Putin of Russia, a secularist, to tell us, oh no, we broke open the Russian icon vaults and we see images of people who lived back there. 7 to 8% non-Hispanic whites. God ascending in the midst of Black Hebrews and Jews at the time, even the Romans who we saw in Wales. And again, I just wanted to make the point. This is AI. I admit this is an AI piece on Romans. That's a wall. And that's not AI. These are images taken from Wales standing today. So we know what Romans looked like. And visiting the sites in North Africa, the villages, with thousands of faces ripped off, what Romans looked like. So you're going to tell me that the Review and Herald, they dare to publish and print, even on behalf of the Ellen White estate. The source is given, ellenwhite.info. Ellen White on Jesus's ascension. And we take this, we buy it. Again, they're defining who we are, what we are, where we are, when we are. And Christ is ascending. And this is right now in Wales today, this very day. Folks, I mean, we worship God in spirit and truth. What's the point? Do we just directly just worship Satan? And I don't even want to be the words even utter the words out of my mouth, but we worship God in spirit and truth, or we worship someone else. And we have to get serious about this. And it's to protect the next generation. Who are we truly? This image I took with my own camera. This is not something that is taken from any other source. This is a primary source, being in that hole, in that ancient place of Romans. And this makes sense when you look at the demographics today. And when you look at the numbers, it's not just, oh, we only have 30%, 40% global Black melanated people. I would say they're almost half of the planet in some shape or form has a degree of melanated skin. And if you look at the Hispanics, which a lot of them have black features, if the atrocities in the last 100 years, the poisoning, the jailing, my goodness, the lynching, the locking up, and when you lock up someone, you're culling that demographic because they can't procreate in jail. When you look at all of the things, even harsh economic conditions, where people truly destroys the fabric of the society, it destroys the family, as single mothers, and these kids are going to vice. If these things didn't happen, I mean, our numbers would be at easily, the population at all would be at 12 billion. I mean, you can do the math. We had 700 million people in the 1700s. Now, 300 years later, it's over 8 billion. And of course, there were mechanized things in place. People were not making babies around the hour and some ritual. So we know something happened to accelerate this population, but still the numbers of black and brown people have fallen off a cliff. And the kind of vaccinations and efforts made to go into Africa to cull and pull back the population. Because, of course, people know that if people see the numbers and see the numbers themselves, it would be less convincing. People like myself would have gotten up and said something. But now we see the rapid decline in birth rates. As whites having children, we can see it more clearly, more information available. Like these images, people are asking those questions. They're challenging the narrative. And so what is it that we truly believe in?
This is GTR, Genesis, Timeline and Roots.
So let's, folks, GTR is here not to provide, we can't provide all the answers, but to be provocative, to be inspiring, to be helpful, like in the case of David Rivers and other persons who contact me daily for help with their family trees, to help with genealogy, but to present a roadmap, present a framework for understanding our history, and to be able, if we're truly in Christendom, to worship God. As episode 16 says, made black in the God's image. Worship him in spirit and truth. Otherwise, what's the point? And why should we even bother? Let's be serious. Let's take our faith and religion in a serious way in light. And for this, I ended this episode 30. We looked at the pioneers of Seventh-day Adventism, the Adventist Church. And we noticed on the case of Ellen White, truly the last profiles, both Ellen White and her husband, James Springer White, truly the most sort of connected profiles to Black ancestry. I'll draw and take away that would be the concluding remarks. The others who had short ancestral trees, most likely deeply, heavily connected to meadow cabbage babies, not using that as a demeaning, a derogatory term, but it is now becoming factual. We need to use our brains and reconcile those elements of things that fit and things that don't fit. So thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in to this exciting episode 30, Genesis Timeline Roots, and the pioneers of the Adventist Church. Good morning, good evening, good night. Thank you for watching. This is GTR.